Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 5 of 13 days of Booktober. We are really moving along here. I am so excited to be filming this series, so I do hope you guys are enjoying it. And we are on day 5 now. Day 5 of 13 days of Booktober. That is so exciting, and I'm so excited for today's video because we are going to be talking about my top 13 romance/fantasy book recs for the fall. I had to do both romance and fantasy together because one, I actually haven't read that many romances that are fall specifically themed, and I don't read that many fantasy books to have an entire video dedicated to just fantasy. So we're combining them, but I'm excited. So let's start talking about my top 13 romances/fantasies in no particular order. I am just talking about them. They're not ranked highest to lowest or anything like that. The first book I have is The Gracier by Kim Liggett. I hope I'm saying that right. This one is such a fun YA fantasy that I don't really hear that much about, and I feel like it's really good, and I think it should be a little more hyped because this is so much fun. This gives off a dystopian kind of vibe. They compare it to the Hunger Games, which I guess I kind of get, but I wouldn't necessarily say go into this expecting the Hunger Games because it's not exactly like it. So this book is following the Gracier. The Gracier is when a girl turns 16 years old. She's essentially banished to like this forest place where she is meant to rid herself of her magical powers. The thing is, while they're banished to this forest area to rid themselves of these powers, they are up against a lot of things. It gives off kind of like a Hunger Games-esque vibe where some of them may not survive because girls will turn on each other, things will start happening, and it gives off Hunger Games-esque vibes. But the idea isn't that they're supposed to essentially fight to the death or the end or anything like that. This book gets crazy. It's honestly such a fun take on what it means to be a girl and the power of being a girl and stuff like that, especially since the whole idea is that women have like this spell over men. This book was just honestly so interesting and so fun. The dystopian aspect of it and how much power the Gracier holds over the community that we're following is so interesting. I honestly really would recommend this. Even though it's YA, it reads so well. It's engaging. It's like fast paced. Everything that happens, you're just like, what's going to happen next? How is this going to end? And it's also a standalone, which is amazing because not a lot of fantasies are standalones nowadays. So definitely recommend if you haven't read this already because you're in for a good time. The next book I have, of course I had to include, is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. This is probably one of my top 3 fantasy series I've ever read. I love dark academia, and this book gives the best dark academia gothic moody vibes. It's so good. The magic system in this one is so fun and different. I really enjoyed it. It's a duology and it's completed, so you don't have to worry about waiting until the next book comes out. And she also just released a new book series called The Night and the Moth, which I've heard a lot of great things about and I definitely want to get to, so I'm very excited for that. But this one, highly recommend because this story was just so engaging from start to finish. The second book wraps up everything so well. This world was just so much fun to learn about and dive into because it's not like one I've read before, so it was definitely a lot of fun to experience that world, the magic system, and following our main character through the journey was just so much fun. So this story, we're following Elspeth, who has this voice in her head that she calls Nightmare. She goes on a quest to essentially get rid of this curse that's plaguing their town. And the quest involves them having to find these 12 cards that each possess a different power associated with them. They have to collect all of these cards in order to get rid of this curse. And the adventure that we go on this is so much fun. I really liked all the characters we kind of get to know in this series. It's just honestly such a perfect fall time read. I highly recommend that if you're going to read it, the fall time is honestly probably the perfect time to read it because the vibes are just going to match the fall season so perfectly. I really enjoyed this. If you haven't already, I know the series is very popular, so If you haven't already read it, I definitely recommend this one because it's a very good time. The next book I have is Ninth House by Leif Bardugo. This one is, I think, like the first adult series that she released after like the Grishaverse, if you've ever read the Grishaverse. But this one is a completely different world. This is more adult fantasy, but we're following Alex Stern in this one, who is kind of had a down on her luck kind of life up until recently. She's given this opportunity to attend Yale College. And if you like dark academia, secret societies, culty vibes, this is for you. This is honestly such an interesting take on a fantasy book, but I think something about secret societies in a very well-established kind of like university gives off such a vibe. And this book, I think, is going to be a trilogy, if I'm not mistaken. But the first 2 books are out. So it's Ninth House and then Hellbent. And I personally enjoyed Hellbent more than this one, but I still think the series is fun. There's dark magic, ghosts, secret societies. Like, we get so much into this, and I think it's such a perfect fall time read. If you haven't already read this series, or if you've been contemplating whether or not you want to check it out, I think it's worth the read, especially if you're a dark academia lover. I think you're going to eat it up because, I mean, Yale University with secret societies, dark magic, like, this is screaming dark academia, and I personally really enjoyed it. The next book we have is The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana. I love this story. The found family aspect, the little romance we get into this. I enjoyed this so much. If you want a romance that's going to be maybe a little more general fiction than it is like straight out romance, I think you're going to really enjoy this because the vibes that we get, not even just with the romance, but with the found family aspect, hit so well for me. The witchy vibes are there. It gave off just the perfect cozy romance fiction-y kind of vibes, and I personally just enjoyed this so much. I think the back of the book kind of sums up this story kind of well. It says, a warm and uplifting novel about an isolated witch whose opportunity to embrace a quirky new family and a new love changes the course of her life, which is exactly what you get. The main character that we're following, Mika, I loved her. She was so sweet. Something I really thought was super interesting about this one, the witches had to, one, hide their magic, but they also couldn't congregate, or else it would make it kind of like that their powers would mingle, and it would make it easier for them to be found out. And that was so different, but it really added to the whole isolation of being a witch. And I feel like that added so much to her character. This story is so heartwarming. It's definitely got those witchy, cozy fall vibes, and if you love that for fall, definitely read this one. This author also just released a new book called The Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping, which I am so excited to read. I cannot wait to read it because I love this one so much. I have very high expectations for that one, so I'm very excited, but definitely add this one to your list if you haven't already read it. The next book I have isn't necessarily a fall themed book, but the reason why I'm putting it on this list is because the 2 characters actually meet at a Halloween party, which I think you could use that as an excuse to count this as part of like your fall reading experience if you're looking for a rom-com that's just not going to be associated with magic or anything like that. I have Out on the Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. I read this book earlier this year, and I honestly haven't stopped recommending it to everybody and anybody, and I found a way to put it on this list because of course I did. But we are following Win and Bo, who meet at Win's best friend's Halloween party. They decide that they want to have like a little one-night stand, and they end up accidentally getting pregnant. They decide that they're going to do this journey together, and we're following essentially their journey, them getting to know each other, building like this little life for their future baby. And I honestly have recommended this one probably so many times now, but I highly recommend. It is a pregnancy trope, but honestly, I feel like she did this one so well. Both characters are so likable, and their relationship that we see that gets built and how they end up developing feelings for each other and stuff like that is just so sweet. Definitely read this one if you haven't already, because this story is just, it's so good. The next book we have is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston is one of my favorite authors. I will recommend pretty much all of her books. I think there was only one book I've read by her so far that I didn't absolutely love, but this one is such a fun one and perfect for the fall season. This one follows Florence. She's a ghostwriter for very like well-known romance writers, and she had a breakup recently that made her kind of like not believe in love anymore, which impacted her being able to write her love stories. And her editor is very much not wanting to extend the deadline for this book that she has to write. She's thinking, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna lose my job because I can't write. She ends up getting a phone call from her family back home saying that her father passed away. When she goes home for the funeral, she ends up seeing this ghost, and they go on this journey to essentially figure out what's wrong with him, why he's there, and the romance that gets built in this story is just so fun and unique. It's got the perfect fall vibes. It was just such a fun, different kind of romance. So I definitely recommend for that perfect fall time romance vibe. The next book I have is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Ciccarelli. This is another YA fantasy series, but don't let that stop you from reading this because this one is so much fun, especially if you like an enemies to lover, cat and mouse kind of vibe. It's so much fun. This story is following Rune, who is a witch, but she's keeping that kind of like on the down low because witches are all being taken and killed by the witch hunters in this book. And Rune, as an undercover witch, is trying to save as many witches as she can from the witch hunters that are trying to kill them off. The cat and mouse game that we get in this is so much fun. The romance, the friendships we see in this, like this series, it's a duology, and both are out, so you can read them both. And I feel like the second book really wraps up the series so well too. So if you haven't already read this, because I feel like this is another very popular one, but if you haven't already read this, I highly recommend this one. It's just so much fun and they read so quickly. So I definitely think this is going to be a perfect fall time, especially in October, because we're following witches and witch hunters. You can't get more October than that. The next book I have is Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. This series has my heart. I absolutely love the Kingdom of Wicked series. This is a trilogy. There are 3 books in this series and they are all out. And there's also a spin-off series that follows the other brothers that we kind of get glimpses of throughout this series. But this story is following Amelia. Her and her sister are witches, and one day she ends up finding her sister murdered, and she essentially goes on this little quest to figure out what happened to her sister. And in that quest, she ends up enlisting the help of one of the princes of hell, Wrath, who you guys are going to love Wrath. This story, it gets twisty, it gets kind of crazy. The princes of hell are so much fun to read about. Each of them has like their own like wrath, envy, gluttony, pride. What are the other ones? Envy. I can't remember the other ones, but they are all so much fun to read about, and I am so excited that we're also getting each of their stories as well. So far, we've had Envy and Gluttony. I don't know if I said Gluttony, but he's one too. I think we're going to get one for all the rest of the brothers, but I definitely recommend for the fall because the vibes are definitely there. I mean, we're talking about the Princes of Hell. This series is so much fun, and I would highly recommend. The next book I have is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This story is another one of those dark academia vibe kind of reads, especially since we're at Oxford University in like London. Like the vibes of that campus are top notch. And this story just gives off the perfect dark academia vibes. I've probably said that about every book that I've mentioned that has dark academia vibes, but I honestly just really love dark academia. So you'll see that I recommend a lot of those kinds of books. But this one is following Robin. He was orphaned at a really young age and adopted by this professor who essentially starts to prepare him to enroll and get accepted into the Babel program at Oxford, where the students that get accepted into the program are tasked with doing the translations and taking care of the magic that this tower essentially holds. The concept of this story is honestly really interesting, and I will say that this is a historical fantasy more than anything. So if historical fiction isn't really your thing, I don't know that this historical fantasy will be your thing, because it's not going to read like a regular fantasy book. It's definitely got those historical elements. especially because we also visit other countries and stuff like that in this book. So it is a little bit more dense than your typical fantasy, but it's honestly so worth the read. The story is just really engaging. Definitely read the premise. If it doesn't sound like it's going to be interesting to you, like, don't read it, because this is not a book for everybody. If you like historical fiction books, I definitely think you might like this, because it is kind of like a historical fiction just with magic, right? So you're still getting that fantasy element, but you're also getting that historical element that makes it just really interesting. And I don't know, I definitely found this to be really engaging, and I would recommend it if those topics sound interesting to you. If what I said doesn't really sound interesting to you, this is probably not for you, but if it does sound interesting to you, I think you'll enjoy it. Next, I have Lotus by Jennifer Hartman. This is the last romance I have on my list. This one isn't necessarily a fall theme book, but I think it fits because it's kind of like a darker romance. It's like a romance thriller almost, which I think would make this a perfect read for like the fall season, especially if you're one that likes reading thrillers during this time. I definitely think if you wanted to switch it up with a romance that gives thriller vibes, this one would be a really good one. But this one is following Oliver, who was kidnapped when he was about 8 years old, I think, and nobody knew what happened to him. And now 20 years later, he comes back. Because Oliver was kidnapped when he was so young, he kind of has to reacclimate to the world because he was essentially kept sheltered, didn't really know much about the changes in the world. So when he's out, all of a sudden there's these changes in technology and all this other stuff that he just didn't know about while being in captivity. So we're essentially following Oliver's journey of reacclimating himself to the world and reestablishing his relationship with his brother and also Sydney, who was his best friend once upon a time. And of course, a relationship starts brewing there. And I will say it does get dark, so definitely be aware of that. I mean, we are following an 8-year-old that did get kidnapped, but the story is really engaging. The thrilling mystery aspect that we get of trying to solve like what happened to Oliver and all the stuff that's happening in their current day-to-day life. There are darker topics, like I said, but I don't think it's necessarily too dark. But there is a content warning page if you want to read that and see if this will be a book for you. But I definitely think this is worth the read. I ended up picking this one up because I read Still Beating by this author, which was another really good one as well. If you're looking for another romance with a thrilling aspect to it, definitely recommend this one if it sounds kind of interesting to you. It's a little different, and I think it's a good book to kind of like throw in the mix of you don't want a cozy romance, you don't want a thriller. I think this one's going to give you the best of both worlds with that romance with a thriller aspect to it. The last 3 books I have are all by one of my favorite authors, V.E. Schwab. I think I have said plenty of times on this channel, but I love V.E. Schwab. If V.E. Schwab puts out a book, I'm gonna read it, and I'm probably gonna love it too. But the first one I have is Vicious. This is a duology, and if you have not read this duology, please read it, because this is the perfect dark fantasy story. It's so good. This one is following Victor and Eli. Victor and Eli were college roommates, and they both had like this very strange interest in near-death experiences, and this interest kind of developed into an experiment where they realized that under the right conditions, a near-death experience, when brought back, could give you some extraordinary powers. And we're essentially following that story, and this book gets twisty. It's so interesting. The concept of it, the abilities that Eli and Victor have are so interesting. I personally love this series. If you have not already, I highly recommend it. Like I said, it is a duology, so there's 2 books. It's Vicious, and I think the second one is called Vengeful. They're both so good, so addicting. I could not put this book down. I wanted to know immediately how it was all going to wrap up. The story is very high stakes. It's so crazy, but it's honestly such a ride. Fall is definitely the perfect time to read this though, because when you're reading it, the book is very moody and dark and macabre. And I mean, you are dealing with near-death experiences, right? Like bringing somebody back from the brink of death kind of situation. And that can get kind of dark. But this series is so much fun. I highly recommend it. It's worth the read. You're gonna have so much fun with this. The next one I have, of course, is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. If you haven't already heard of this book, if you have not already picked up this book, please let this be your sign, because this book is so good. This is another one that kind of like takes on a more historical feel without it actually being like a historical fantasy, but it gives off those like vibes, mainly based on the kind of life that Addie lives. But this one is such a beautiful story mixed in with some fantasy. We're essentially following Addie, who makes this deal with this mysterious man who gives her the ability to live forever. But the caveat is that anyone that she meets, as soon as they no longer see her, forget who she is. So Addie essentially lives many years with nobody remembering her. And then one day she ends up in this town where she goes to this bookstore and she meets this guy, and she returns the next day and he remembers her. And we're essentially following the storyline of how is it that he's the only person in many years who has ever remembered her? What's the connection? And the relationship we see with this guy, but also Addie's relationship with the mysterious man that grants her this wish, is so interesting. The way this ends is so fascinating. I am obsessed with this book, this story. Everything about this was just so perfectly done. V.E. Schwab's writing is just so beautiful in this. You literally are painted a picture of all the things that Addie goes through in her many, many years of life, and the heartbreak, the sadness, every emotion that's put into this book, you feel so strongly. And I love this book so much. I highly recommend it. Please read this if you haven't already, because it's such a beautiful story. And the last book that I have by V.E. Schwab, but also on this list, is Gallant. I adore this story. This gives off almost like Coraline vibes, where you know how she has that other mother that's like in a different like universe almost. This one's following Olivia, who is kind of like orphaned. She lives at this boarding school, and one day she receives this letter from her last living relative, essentially asking her to come home to Gallant. And when she gets there, the mysteries of this house, of how she was invited there and everything like that, starts to come to light. And this story is just such an interesting tale. We have like this almost like a haunted house vibe, but it's not scary, but it's giving off those dark vibes. And I don't know, I don't even know how to explain this, but just know that this book is an experience. What I really liked about this story though is there are like little depictions throughout that I think are just like really interesting and just kind of like give you an idea of how odd I guess some of the things are. But I don't know, some of the depictions in the book were just so fascinating and add to the reading experience. But I definitely recommend this if you haven't already read this. It's definitely a perfect book for the fall season because it's got those like spooky vibes, but it's not spooky, it's not scary, but it has like those vibes, those dark, eerie kind of vibes going on. It's definitely interesting. I highly recommend this. I highly recommend pretty much anything by V.E. Schwab, but this one is another one that's really good for the fall spooky season. But those are all 13 romance/fantasy books that I would recommend for the fall/October season. I think they're all going to just have the right vibe for this time of year. And if not, I think they're perfect to read honestly whenever, but definitely recommend for this specific season. I would love to know if you guys have read any of these books. So if you've read them, I would love to know what your thoughts were. That's it for today's video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for joining me on day 5 of 13 Days of Booktober. I do hope you guys are enjoying this series. I'm having so much fun filming it for you, and it's going by so quickly. So I do hope you guys are enjoying it. I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, my links are down below if you want to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, Goodreads, because I do post there. But I will see you guys tomorrow for day 6 of 13 Days of Booktober. Bye!